This is the Louie Tee Network.
Louie Tee Live. Who else could be me? You're me. Louie Tee, welcome to our second day of two-a-days here on the Louie Tee Network as we're in knee-deep the season previews for the 2017 NFL season. We already took care of the NFC South. We already took care of the AFC East. Now we're making our way up north, as in AFC North division. And this one was a runaway for the Pittsburgh Steelers a season ago. Everyone in that division struggled. No one really saw Cincinnati struggling the way that they did. We expected Baltimore not to have a big season. They actually made it to 500. And the Browns were, well, the Browns. And so this is going to be an interesting season for this division. I don't know if anything changes in terms of the standings necessarily, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as it was a season ago. And so we'll get into the predictions for this division here in a second. But first and foremost, thank you for joining me. Had some technical difficulties starting out, and you know how I am. The mic was just muted. That's all it was. It was really a simple fix, but at the time I couldn't figure out why there was no audio. I wasn't going for it, so I just ended the stream, started it over. But in any event, if you're out there watching and want your voice to be heard, simply use the hashtag #LouieTLive. Whether you're on Twitter, I have Twitter open right next to me, or you're on the live stream and in the chat discussion box below, make yourself at home. Use the hashtag #LouieTLive to have your comments read. And we're going to jump into this breakdown of the AFC North. We'll go in order of the teams, the way they finished in this division, starting from best and first to worst. And so we'll start with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is a team that you just expect to make it to the postseason just about every season, barring injuries. And what's amazing about the Steelers is that they have injuries at the most critical positions, it seems like, every single year. Yet they somehow, some way are able to overcome their circumstances and win double-digit games and get into the postseason, and most years win the division while they're at it. And it's a testament to the way this organization is run, the way they're built, and their head coach, Mike Tomlin. I know some people out there aren't Mike Tomlin fans. Don't have to be, but you will respect what this man has done. His body of work in Pittsburgh falls in line with the guys that came before him and preceded him in Pittsburgh. And that's why the Pittsburgh Steelers don't have 800 coaches in their franchise history. Only 3 over the last probably like 30, 40 years, it seems like. And Tomlin is in the next line of those guys, and he just received a contract extension through 2020. So let's talk about this Steelers team and what I predicted for them a season ago: 12-4, 4-2 in the division. I wasn't far off. And what I'm realizing, looking at a lot of these predictions, I'm usually not too far off. I'm usually a game or two. There are the rare exceptions where I'm about 3 games off, and there were some teams that really surprised me last year that shocked me in a good and in a bad way. We're going to talk about a team that shocked me in a bad way in this particular division last season, but I'm usually a game or 2 off. I'm not that far off. 11-5, I gave them a little bit more credit, but I didn't expect Ben Roethlisberger to go down for as long. I knew he was going to go down. It's Ben Roethlisberger. He always goes down. I didn't expect him to go down for as long, and it was really during a critical stretch of the season against some good football teams where you just couldn't afford for him to go down. But in any event, 11-5, a game off, 5-1 in the division, so they actually played better than I expected for them to play in the division. And some of that had to do with just the lack of competition in that division as it stands. Cincinnati wasn't good, and we didn't expect that. We knew Cleveland wasn't going to be very good. They always split with Baltimore. Generally, in that series, neither team sweeps. So you had to know one of those games was going to go the way of the Ravens, and so they were able to go 5-1 in the division, and that really pretty much helped them seal the division crown in 2016. And so Let's talk about why they're going to have a legitimate shot of doing that yet again in 2017. We start with their offseason acquisitions, and none bigger than the re-signing of Antonio Brown, your all-world wide receiver, one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in all of the National Football League. Had to bring him back into the fold, and they did so early on in the offseason. Weren't able to do the same with Le'Veon Bell, but they did retain his services by using the franchise tag, and so he'll be back as well. Offensive tackle Alejandro Villanueva also back, even if he's not starting, which he probably will be at left tackle and did so a season ago. He'll at least provide you with depth, if nothing else. Linebacker James Harrison, who will be turning 897 tomorrow, is also re-signed on a 2-year deal. This guy is an ageless wonder for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I talked about the franchise tag being handed out to Le'Veon Bell. He says he will report to Steelers facility on September the 1st. Makes sense. That's when training camp and the preseason is over and you're getting ready to install the first game plan. So that makes sense, and that's what we expected all along. He'll sign his franchise tag. He'll suit up, and we'll forget all about the fact that he's playing under a 1-year franchise tag deal. And then the biggest acquisition of them all, probably, because we all knew Antonio Brown wasn't going anywhere. I knew there were some people out there talking crazy after the whole Facebook fiasco in the playoffs last year being leaked and talking crazy about Le'Veon Bell. Those two weren't going anywhere. They're such a huge part of what the Steelers do offensively. There's no way those guys weren't going to be back. But Martavius Bryant, Big Ten, coming back into the fold off of his suspension. That is huge for this Steelers football team. If he can get back to the player that he was pre-suspension, they've got something on their hands brewing offensively in Pittsburgh if they can get Juju Smith-Schuster to stay healthy and provide for them in the slot. So they got some stuff. And Big Ten, Martavius Bryant coming back into the fold. Just as big an offseason acquisition as you'll find with this Steelers football team. As we go to their key losses, not many losses, and that's one thing the Steelers do very well, is they retain their own for the most part, guys that they value. They don't let them wander the streets very often, but guys that they don't seem to feel like fit what they're trying to do. And in the case of Ladarius Green, who's no longer with them, and he was just a season ago a big offseason acquisition this time last year, couldn't stay healthy. And the concussions became a concern. His injury history started to catch up with him. And the Steelers just basically cut bait and moved on. And also long snapper Greg Warren. Look, I know you don't want to list a long snapper as a key loss, but when he's been doing it as long as Greg Warren has been doing it for at such a high level, it's a comfort knowing that this guy's going to get the job done. And they drafted a long snapper in 2017, spent a late-round draft choice on a long snapper, and so because of that, Greg Warren became expendable. But we'll see what happens with that, and if their new long snapper can come in and just do his job. We don't talk long snappers when they do their job. Actually, Oakland Raiders, what happens when you lose your long snapper? It does become an issue. But in any event, that's the Steelers offseason in a nutshell. Obviously, we're not talking about rookies and draft choices. Those guys may or may not have an impact. We'll see what happens with them. But we go from all of those to the Steelers schedule, and I want to take a look at the 2017 schedule of the Pittsburgh Steelers because this is a team trying to defend their AFC North crown. And let's get into a storyline before we jump into wins and losses for this Steelers football team. And the storyline for me is Ben Roethlisberger and how committed is he. We've heard all offseason about retirement, maybe next year, maybe this year. He decides to come back. I know one thing's for sure. Ben Roethlisberger loves to be the center of attention. And I don't think he ever intended to retire. He just wanted everybody uttering his name. Will Ben retire? I think the Steelers organization knew he wasn't going anywhere either. But they do need to prepare themselves. Once a guy starts talking about retirement and using the R word and throwing it around consistently, he's 1 foot out the door. And that's my concern, is how committed is Ben Roethlisberger this season? Is he thinking and mulling over retirement seriously? Will he hang it up next year? How good will he be? And can he stay healthy? Probably first and foremost. And really, that's the Steelers' in a nutshell, can they stay healthy? Can Le'Veon Bell stay healthy? I mean, he got injured in the playoffs, and that was basically all she wrote for this Steelers football team. Can Ben Roethlisberger stay healthy? His health is the difference between them maybe winning 12 or 13 games and getting a number 1 seed, getting a number 2 seed, and not having to travel to Foxborough in January or February or January, and or having to travel to, say, Denver or somewhere like that in January come playoff time. Their seeding depends on his health, and if he can play 14 or 15 games instead of only playing in 10 or 11, that's the difference between them winning 10, 11, 12, or 13 games. So the health of Ben Roethlisberger, the health of Le'Veon Bell, the ability for Martavis Bryant to stay out of trouble, these are all storylines for me. How the Steelers are able to respond to some of the injuries that will occur throughout the course of the season. Will Ben Roethlisberger stay healthy? Can this defense get it together? They're putting pieces together, but can this defense put it together? We'll see. All right, so let's jump into wins and losses for this Steelers football team. We start at Cleveland. This used to be a layup, and I'm telling you right now, the defense in Cleveland is going to be much improved. They're still lacking on the offensive side of the football, and that worries me to the point where, even though I think this is going to be a lot tougher than it was a season ago, I expect the Pittsburgh Steelers to go on the road and beat the Cleveland Browns in week number 1. You follow that up with a week 2 matchup at home versus the Minnesota Vikings, one that I expect you to be able to win. And so because of that, going to add another W here and start the season off 2-0 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Week 3, you're at Chicago again. The Bears are going to be better, just like the Browns. Going to be better. I think they're going to be an improved team. How much? I don't know the answer to that, but I think they're going to be a very, very, very competitive football team, but not competitive enough to beat the likes of the Steelers, taking the Steelers in week 3 at Chicago. At Baltimore, week 4, that's a big matchup in the AFC North. The one thing I can say about these two teams, that being the Steelers and the Ravens, is that neither one of these teams respects the other's house at all. They never take their shoes off. They never respect the house rules. They usually piss all over the toilet seat and don't wipe it up. They don't wash their hands. These teams are very disrespectful in each other's house. And that's what family business is all about. And so in week number 3, I could see the Pittsburgh Steelers going on the road and beating the Baltimore Ravens. In fact, I see them doing that exact thing in week number 4, going on the road and beating the Baltimore Ravens. And so I will add another W for this Pittsburgh Steelers football team. Week 5, you're at home versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know what the Jaguars are going to be. I don't think they're a very good football team right now. That their whole quarterback situation has just got me befuddled. You'd like to think that they'd figure it out. But if you're telling me that Blake Bortles may not be the answer and Chad Henne is, I'm going to give you another win here in at home versus Jacksonville. At Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. This is where I think you take your first L of the season. The Chiefs are a tough team, especially at home. Are you capable of beating the Chiefs? Absolutely. But the Chiefs have proven in the past that they're very capable of beating you as well. You go to Arrowhead, tough place to play. I'm taking the Chiefs in that one to give the Steelers their first loss of the season. The next week, you come back home to take on the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that they struggle in Pittsburgh, to say the least. They are comfortable, though, much like Baltimore, going into Pittsburgh and winning. 2 years ago when this team was really good, they went into Pittsburgh in a snowstorm and won a football game in a sloppy, tough, hard-nosed affair. They're capable. They can get it done. I just don't see them doing that. I'm going to take the Steelers here at home versus the Cincinnati Bengals to run their record to 6-1 on the season. As we go to their last game prior to the bye at Detroit, Sunday Night Football. Boy, Lions at home on primetime television doesn't mean much to me. In fact, I could see the Lions stepping up, and I always like to err on the side of caution when you're talking primetime games at the crib, but nonetheless, I think the Steelers are good enough, if Roethlisberger is healthy, to go into Detroit and win that game, which puts them at 7-1 going into their bye week. And so they come off the bye, and they immediately go to Indy to take on the Colts. And I actually don't like this spot for them. And you know what the thing is with Indy? Is that you never know which Indianapolis Colts team is going to show up. When you expect them to lose, they go to Green Bay and they win. When you expect them to win, they lay an egg. And so this is one of those games you expect them to lose. Remember, the Steelers went to Indy on Thanksgiving last year and mopped these boys. They could very well do the same thing in this game. I'm not betting on that, though. I think this is going to be a much improved Colts football team. If Andrew Luck's healthy, they can take that one. Then you go short week, Thursday night football, home for the Tennessee Titans. That is a dicey game there because the Titans are going to be much improved. And I think that's one of those teams that's going to be very scary because they can run the football. Marcus Mariota playing with a ton of confidence. Again, if he's healthy, I could easily see this one being a loss, but I'm not going to go there. That's one of those young teams that I'm going to make them prove it to me. And so I'm going to give you another W there at home, Thursday night, short week against the Tennessee Titans. If that one was in Tennessee, I might rethink it, but it's at home. And so is the next contest. 10 days off after the Thursday night football contest. You come home yet again, this time, big test. Pittsburgh Steelers, Green Bay Packers, Sunday night football. Doesn't get much better than this. Boy, I'm going to take the Packers in this one. I am, I'm a huge supporter of the Green Bay Packers every single year. I don't know why. I just am. And I think that's a game that they can go on the road and win in Pittsburgh. You know what? That defense is going to have to step up. I've seen good things from them this offseason and into the preseason. If they're playing well defensively, they're going to win that game. If they're not, and the Steelers are playing well on the offensive side of the football, Steelers are going to win that game. But I'm going with the Packers as of right now. Monday, December 4th is a Monday night contest on the road in the jungle. Welcome to the jungle. Taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. One thing I can tell you about the Steelers, they have a lot of success in Cincinnati. So much so that I believe they can win this game. But I don't think they're going to sweep the Cincinnati Bengals this season. They did that last year. I don't believe they're going to be able to repeat and duplicate that. So I'm going to give them a loss on that one. And really, it doesn't matter. I just think they're going to split the season series with Cincinnati. So whether that's at home or in Cincinnati where they lose that game, it really doesn't matter. But I'm going to give them the win at home and a loss at Cincinnati on Monday night. Then you have a home contest versus the Baltimore Ravens. And like I told you, you two teams don't respect the other's house. And this is a Sunday night football contest. And I hate to do it to you, 3 consecutive losses, but you're not sweeping the Baltimore Ravens either. And because of that, and again, doesn't really matter which one occurs where, whether that first game against Baltimore in Baltimore is a loss, they're not going to get swept and they're not going to sweep the Ravens. So you can flip-flop them and put them in any order you like, but they're not going to sweep the Ravens. And so it just so happens I have them losing 3 straight. Probably won't happen in 2017. They probably won't lose 3 consecutive games at any point in the season, but it's possible. I mean, that's a tough stretch. Whoa, speaking of tough, home for the New England Patriots. That's a tough football game, a team that you've struggled with annually. You two seem to win your division every year, play each other every year, and the Patriots seem to beat you just about every year. But I think this year is going to be different. You're at home this time. Normally you have to go to Foxborough. This time you're at home. And if Ben Roethlisberger is healthy, which he should be, that late in the season, you would hope that he's not nursing some type of injury. I expect you to get that W and snap your 3-game losing streak. Then you go on the road to take on a tough Houston Texans football team on Christmas Day. They're going to have a doubleheader, so there's no Sunday night game in Week 16. They're taking the Sunday night game away and adding it to Monday so that we'll have 2 Monday games on Christmas Day. This being that Sunday game that should have been on Sunday night, moved to Monday, is this Texans-Steelers game on the road versus the Texans. This could easily be an L. And at that point of the season, the question then becomes, who's the quarterback for the Houston Texans? It doesn't matter to me because I'm not picking Deshaun Watson nor Tom Macho Man Randy Savage, ooh yeah, to go and get a W late in the season versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. I can't bring myself to do it. And of course, you get the Browns again, and I think you're going to double up against the Browns. Get another one versus those boys to wrap up the season at 11-5 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so let's see what they do in the division. I've got them going 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. Then I have them losing a game apiece to the Ravens and Bengals before finishing up with the sweep of the Browns. 4-2 in the division, 11-5 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a duplicate of what they were able to accomplish last year. They were 5-1 in the division. I think Cincinnati will get them once this year, unlike last year. So tell me what you guys think. Let's get to some of your comments. Twitter is open and available. If you are out there and you want your comment read, by all means, use the hashtag Louie Tee Live on Twitter at In The Lab Room. Make sure you follow me at In The Lab Room to tweet me. Let's get to some of your comments and see how you guys feel about this division. And so, see what we got. We start the night with no BE. I am not doing the call-in tonight either. I am sorry. I know you love calling in and being one of the first ones to call in, but I am not doing the call-in segment tonight. And I may bring it back next week. I doubt it, though. Don't get your hopes up. Andrew Kim, my man AK, says, I swear the Ravens are always one of the most injury-prone teams. We're going to get to that when we get to the Ravens, as they are the next team that we'll talk about. RG3 hashtag says, how many sacks do you see Myles Garrett having this season? We'll talk about Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns when we get to the Browns. Andrew Kim says, the Ravens offense might be a little bit better than last year, but it's still anemic compared to the Steelers Bengals. And the defense is going to be really good, though maybe better than last year. So we'll see. We'll talk Ravens football here in a second. Edgar Vargas says, in all seriousness, it'll take some time for Bell to get back in the swing of things. I don't know. Usually with running backs, as long as he comes back to the Steelers in shape, he knows the offense. He should be able to assimilate himself very easily. I fully expect him to hit the ground running and not miss a beat when he comes back. So let's see. BE says, I got the Steelers going 11-5 with a 4-2 divisional record. Boom. Me and BE on the same page, exact same record, exact same divisional mark for the Steelers as well. Smoke says, I think the Browns will improve, especially with that defense, and Njoku is going to be a stud. We'll talk about the Browns here in a second. See. Q-Bone says 11-5 sounds about right for the Steelers. And Smoke says Ravens offense is a huge concern. So, with that being said, let's jump into that exact team. Perfect segue by my man Smoke as we now jump into the Baltimore Ravens. And let's talk about the Ravens. And I'm going to start out with a Ravens storyline for the season, and it's injuries. My goodness. The Chargers, to me, are the team that is bitten by the injury bug the most every single year. The Reaper has no mercy on the Los Angeles Chargers. Year in and year out, the Chargers are expected to lose 5 to 7 starters before we even get to the halfway point of the season. And by season's end, they're reaching on other teams' practice squad for players, and they're on the waiver wire. They're hurting, are the Chargers, every single year. The Ravens aren't far behind, though. And my man, A.K. Andrew Kim, brought this up. Him being a Ravens fan, he knows it all too well. This is a team that just simply cannot stay healthy. Every year they're dealing with some injuries, whether it's Steve Smith Sr. getting injured or them being ravaged at the tight end position, them having to endure some suspensions. You name it, they're having to deal with it in Baltimore. This year, no different. We'll get to some key losses and guys dealing with injuries and some ailments. But let's talk about what I predicted for this team a season ago. 7-9 and 2-4 in the division was my prediction for the Ravens. They end up being 8-8, so like I told you, I'm usually not that far off. And once again, I'm only a game off with this Ravens football team. 4-2 in the division. I didn't expect them to win as many games in the division as they did. But then again, I didn't expect Cincinnati to be as bad as they were last season, which is probably why I didn't have the Ravens winning but 2 games in the division. I probably had Cincinnati sweeping them, and they were actually able to take care of Cincinnati and dispose of them. So they were able to get it done. They swept the Browns, as everyone did in the division. They beat the Steelers once. They beat the Bengals once. So in any event, this is a team that injuries have already bitten them this year. And the Reaper always comes to collect. And I go back to a long time ago when they had a chance to sign Joe Flacco, and they didn't. And Flacco bet on himself, and he won. They won the Super Bowl. Flacco got a boatload of money. And because of that signing, they had a lot of contracts that they had to void, and the Reaper started collecting ever since then. And I said they made a deal with the devil. They won the Super Bowl, but they did it with making a deal with the devil. And anytime you do that, the Reaper is coming to collect, and he's been collecting in Baltimore, it seems like, ever since. In any event, off-season acquisitions, Brandon Carr at the cornerback position is going to help them tremendously. They also, and if I'm not mistaken, I may have missed one. I think they signed Tony Jefferson too. Don't quote me on that, but I think I left him off this list. If memory serves me correctly, Tony Jefferson is also a guy that they brought in at the safety position. And so that secondary is going to be revamped. It's going to be much better. And if Tony Jefferson is, in fact, on that Ravens roster, and I'm pretty sure that he is, along with Brandon Carr, who I know Cowboys fans think was garbage, but he was reliable. He was there every single week, which is something the Ravens can't account for with some of their better players. He played every single game that he suited up for with the Cowboys and started. And he's a guy that I think is solid. Not great, but he's solid, and he's going to help them. Wide receiver Jeremy Maclin fell into their lap, and they needed a veteran presence at receiver in Baltimore. I thought they were going to try to go and get Victor Cruz. Victor Cruz! Thought they would go after Cruz, but they didn't. He ended up in Chicago. And so I knew they needed a veteran in there somewhere, somehow, some way, and Jeremy Maclin gets released, and voila, there's their veteran. You know, the Ravens love to add veteran wide receivers, whether you go all the way back to Derek Mason or Anquan Bolden late in his career, or Steve Smith Sr. late in his career. That's what the Ravens do. They love adding veteran wide receivers. And Austin Howard, another late off-season acquisition. He was released by the Raiders, fell into the lap of the Ravens, who could desperately use some help along their offensive line. And so he was a welcome addition. They quickly snatched him up, signed him to a multi-year contract. And so he's a guy that's also going to come in and help this Baltimore Ravens team out as well. Key losses, and this is what's going to really sting the Ravens in 2017, much like 2016. Injuries, guys retiring, things of that nature. We start with Zach Orr and John Urschel both retiring in 2017. Urschel he's a smart guy. He doesn't need football. And so he decided to hang it up. It makes sense for him if he's not having fun, if he thinks he may get injured or concussions worry him. this guy's brilliantly, mind-wise, he's brilliant. And so there's no need to play football. If you don't need it, go do something else. And as far as Zach Orr, he's dying to play football. As a matter of fact, he had over half the league tell him, no, you're not healthy enough to play, and he remained retired. This is a guy that was huge for the Ravens at the linebacker position, and they had plans for him in the middle along with C.J. Mosley. Those plans were foiled due to his neck and his spine and the narrowing of his spine and that ailment that he has. And so he's gone. Elvis Dumerville, who was oft injured in Baltimore, no longer there. Offensive lineman Jeremy Zuta traded, along with Timmy Jernigan, also traded in the offseason. So both of those guys no longer on this Ravens football team on both the offensive and defensive lines, respectively. Then your tight end position, which seems to be ravaged every single year, continues to take massive blows. And to me, the Ravens have the best set of tight ends collectively in the league when they're healthy, but the problem is they're never fully healthy, and guys are always suspended. This year, no different. Dennis Pitta goes down in the offseason, and that's the last straw for him. The hip was always troublesome. I told you the hip is nothing to play with, and for Dennis Pitta, it just never seemed to get back to the way it was before the first hip injury that he sustained. They finally cut bait with Dennis Pitta. He's no longer a Baltimore Raven. Darren Waller, a very talented ex-wide receiver convert, can't get his act together off the field, has been busted for smoking weed, and so he's done for at least a season as he's been suspended by the NFL. So another tight end down. And then just when you think it couldn't get any worse at the tight end position for the Ravens, tight end Crockett Gilmore, who was already suspended for violating the league's substance abuse and performance-enhancing drug policies. He also injured himself for the entire season, and so he's gone. And also add running back Kenneth Dixon to the list of guys who are gone, who are not coming back this season due to injury. He also shredded his leg in camp, and so he's gone for the season for the Ravens. I could have thrown Joe Flacco on that list, but he's not going to be gone for very much longer, so I decided to leave him off the list. But the Reaper did reach out and touch their starting quarterback as well. So as you can see, easily the storyline here with the Ravens is, do they have enough depth on this football team? Do they have enough offensively, especially to get it done in a division where there's some teams that have offensive firepower? You saw what the Cincinnati Bengals did in the offseason, in the draft, to improve their offense. They did allow some of their offensive linemen to leave in free agency. However, they did add some targets that will help them and add a big-time addition in the backfield that should help them really alleviate some of the issues offensively that they had a season ago. This Ravens team is lagging offensively. They're lagging due to the lack of depth. We'll see what they're able to do. Can they stay healthy enough to compete in a tough, rough, and rugged AFC North division? This defense, it's going to be dynamite, but will it be enough to win enough games to make themselves relevant come December and possibly into January? Let's get to their schedule and see what that holds for the Baltimore Ravens in the 2017 season. So all four teams in the AFC North squaring off against each other in week number 1. Bengals at home versus this Ravens football team. The Ravens have done a really good job of playing this Cincinnati Bengals team, but I don't see them going on the road week 1 and beating Cincinnati. I'll take the Bengals in that one to get off to a 0-1 start. But there's a silver lining. You come home the very next week and get the Cleveland Browns, and that's a game that I do see you winning to get you back to 500 on the season at 1-1. The NFL gave you an opportunity to get off to a really quick start this season, because in week 3, you go to London to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that is going to be a W. So 2-1. If you can find a way to go to the jungle and beat Cincinnati, you could easily start this season off 3-0. However, I don't have you doing that. I have you starting off this season 2-1. Then you have the Steelers at home in week number 4. I gave you a loss there, gave the Steelers a W. And again, it matters in the context of the season, but in my mind, they're going to split whether this occurs at home or away. You're going to beat the Steelers, and they're going to beat you at least once. But I think the Steelers are going to go into Baltimore early in the season and extinguish, this Ravens team. Then you're at the Raiders, and this is a big game. A couple of years ago, I told you a week 2 contest versus the Raiders is going to be a big game for both of those teams because the Raiders were an up-and-coming team. Derek Carr was just starting to find his stride. Amari Cooper was a rookie. We didn't know what the Raiders quite were yet, but they were a young team looking to make some noise. I said this is a big game for the Raiders, and I also said this is a big game for the Ravens. If the Ravens can find a way to get that one, that shows me that they're not dead yet. If the Raiders beat them, the Raiders are on the up and up, and the Ravens are going to kind of find themselves meddling around the bottom of that AFC North division. They had some fight in that game, but the Raiders were able to beat them in a shootout. I feel like this is the same type of game. Your season could either go up or down maybe because of this game. You're at the Raiders. The Raiders are a good football team this year. And the one thing that we've talked about with this Ravens team is the lack of offensive firepower. I think that's what's going to hurt you in this football game, even though I think your defense could really cause some problems for Derek Carr. And that Raiders offense, I still think they've got enough juice to get it done at home. Excuse me. I meant to give you a loss there, not a W. I'm going to go with the Raiders in that one. And so let's give the Ravens Elski here as they come home. And you get a bounce back versus the Bears at the crib. Expect you to take care of business there. Then you go to Minnesota. I don't like that one. I don't like it at all. And so that's going to be an L for me there. You then have a home Thursday night contest versus the Miami Dolphins. I like you in this spot here. At home, short week. Short weeks for road teams on Thursdays. It's really a tough proposition, a tough ask of a team to go on the road on a short week and win. Not to mention a Dolphins team that's going to be led by Jay Cutler. I think you're going to be able to rattle his cage, make him make some mistakes, win that football game. And then you have a date with the Tennessee Titans right before your bye week. And you know what? I said the Raiders game was a big game. This is a big game, because you're at 4-4 with a chance to go into the bye week with a little bit of momentum, riding a 2-game winning streak. This Tennessee Titans team on the up and up. They're a young team. They're getting better. They're playing with a little bit of confidence. If Mariota's healthy, they're going to win that game. If he's not, you're going to win that game. I think he's going to be healthy at that point in the season. And because of that, I'm going to have to give you an L here in week number 9 as you head into your bye week. You come out of the bye, and that's a tough ask to go on the road to Green Bay and win. Just don't see that happening. And because of that, it's another L for this Ravens football team. You then come home for a Monday night football showdown with the Houston Texans, a team that I think is going to be extremely solid. Really good on the defensive side of football. I got questions about their offense and how good they'll be on that side of the ball. But one thing's for sure, I think their defense is going to be good enough to suffocate your offense. And because of that, I got the Ravens losing on Monday Night Football at home. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That game is at home. I changed my mind. Thought that game was in Houston. I'll take the Ravens at home, even though I still think that Ravens offense may get suffocated by that Texans defense. You're at home. I'll give you the advantage, and I think you can get that one done. You're also at home the very next week versus the Detroit Lions. That, you know what, the Lions, that's a winnable game for the Ravens there against the Lions, who I'm not sold on the road. At home, I think they're a scary team, but on the road, I think that they're going to struggle, and I think that's a game that they could easily struggle in. At Pittsburgh in week number 13, 14, 15, week number 14. I told you you're going to split with them, and look at you all of a sudden getting hot late in the season. Coming on, making a playoff push. You're at Cleveland, and I'm sorry to tell you, but the Browns are going to get you this time. They're a scrappy bunch, and they're playing with nothing to lose at that point of the season. They look at you on a 3-game winning streak, trying to make a push for the postseason, and they come in and they crush your playoff hopes with a debilitating loss in Week 15 at Cleveland. You then turn around and play on Saturday, as most teams will, on December 23rd, Week 16. You're playing against the Indianapolis Colts. This is a winnable football game. However, Boy. I think you're gonna rough Andrew Luck up. You're gonna muck that game up, and you're gonna find a way to get a W there. So going into the final week, you are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 7. And this last one could make or break your season. Cincinnati probably going to be fighting for a playoff spot as well at that point of the season. Maybe even looking for a playoff seeding if they're already in at that point of the season. You're home for the Cincinnati Bengals, the team you lost to in week 1 at Cincinnati. So you start the season with Cincinnati. You close the season with the same Bengals. I think the Bengals actually sweep you in 2017. I think they sweep you. I don't think you got enough offensive juice to get it done against them. And because of that, you are 8-8 in 2017 with a record in the division of 1-1. 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. I skipped one. Oh, there it is. With a divisional record of 1, 2, 3, 4. 2-4 in the division for the Baltimore Ravens at 8-8 on the season. Is that what you did this past season? Did you go 8-8 and you were 4-2 in the division? That was the difference. 2-4 in the division, 8-8 overall for the Baltimore Ravens. And that's about right. This is a Ravens football team that no matter how bad you think they're going to be, usually their head coach, John Harbaugh, finds a way to get them to a respectable record. And I see him being able to do the same thing this season. So, in any event, let's get into your comments. Again, I'm on Twitter. Use the hashtag Louie Tee Live. And see what you guys have to say. Cabin says, Browns over 4 wins. I'm calling it. We'll get to the Browns a little bit later. Ouija HTTR says, man, that Browns logo looks so high school. Hey, man, sometimes you just got to go back to the basics. And they did. Andrew Kim says, Ravens added Danny Woodhead and Tony Jefferson, by the way. Okay, so they did add Tony Jefferson. I thought I missed that. Danny Woodhead is definitely an acquisition that needs to be mentioned. Can he stay healthy? That's been his problem over the last few years, especially in San Diego. He's been banged up a ton. So if he can stay healthy, he'll be a big weapon out of the backfield. But I'm a little apprehensive to talk about him staying healthy because he hasn't been able to do so of late. Edgar Vargas says, damn spot on with Baltimore last season. BE says, hey, Louie, key acquisition. Why didn't you add Tony Jefferson? Yeah, I talked about Tony Jefferson. Vincent Phillips says, prediction, Ravens draft offense with first 4 picks next year. That's a bold statement this early. Cabin says, Ravens got Danny Woodhead, and that's what my man AK also told me as well. Edgar Vargas says, I'd feel sorry for Ravens, but Harbaugh is a punk ass. So Edgar Vargas, not a huge fan of John Harbaugh, thinks he's a little bit of a jerk. Cubone says, those key losses for the Ravens look like a paragraph. It's a lot, man. It's the polar opposite of the key additions for the Browns, and then when we get to them. It's a lot, and that's part of the problem with this Ravens football team, all of the injuries. Smoke says, are you doing another live stream after this one? Yes. NFC North after this one is over and has met its conclusion. Ouija HTTR says the Ravens are going to stink. They're not going to stink. They're just going to be very, very average, which is right where they are normally every single year. See what we got. Anwar Muhammad says 8-8 for the Ravens again. Come on. I mean, I don't know. We're gonna see. I think they're gonna be right around the middle of the pack in terms of record. Smoke says, no lie, I think the Bengals will be nice, but I still don't trust Dalton. He says still don't fully trust Dalton. BE says, I think the Ravens go 10-6, 4-2 in the division. So he's feeling the Ravens. Darth Vader says Ravens offense is hot garbage. And I think that might be the thing that slows them down. We'll see, though. I'm a Joe Flacco fan. You guys know that if you've been following me for any amount of time. So you know how I feel about Joe Flacco. And I think Joe Flacco can get it done if you give him a chance. If they're in the ball game late, you know I love Joe Flacco. So we'll see. Kevin says, why don't you do fantasy football? Not a fantasy football guy. I've said that before. I am going to do a fantasy league for my viewers next season, not this year. But I'm not a huge fan, even though I know a lot about fantasy football because I have a ton of friends that play in leagues. And just because I know a lot about football and what teams are doing, I'm able to know who's a good play, where, and when. But I just hate rooting for individual players. That it doesn't sit well with me. I can't have Dez Bryant on my team and he's playing against my Redskins, yet I have to root for Dez Bryant to eat our ass alive but still hope that we win the game. I just can't, because I can't stand losing, period. I can't stand losing. I'm a sore loser. I don't like to lose at all. So it would kill me to have to sit there and root for Dez Bryant, but I would do it because I want to win, and I just can't do that. So that's pretty much the basis for why I am not a fantasy football guy. But in any event, let's move on to the next team and that finished in this division last year, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that really disappointed me last year. And I talked about teams really surprising me in a good way and in a bad way. The Carolina Panthers might have been the biggest disappointment of 2016. I don't think that the Cincinnati Bengals were that far behind in that department after the season that they turned in 2015. If not for the injury to Dalton, a lot of people think that they could have challenged the Patriots, the Broncos, whomever, for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, they were that good. Remember, they went to Denver late in the season with A.J. McCarron at quarterback and almost won that football game. And at one point, if I'm not mistaken, they were up 14-0 in that game before watching that lead salt away late and losing in overtime. So they were hot that season, and we expected Dalton to come back healthy in 2016 and for them to pick right up where they left off. But they had a tough offseason. They lost a lot of pieces last offseason, and it trickled into the season. I don't think they really ever recovered, had some injuries throughout the course of the year, and they just weren't the same team. You could argue the same thing this year. Another rough offseason when they lose players. And so the question then becomes, are they able? Because I feel like Cincinnati drafts extremely well every year. I thought that last year's draft, was last year's draft a really good draft? No, last year's draft was a ho-hum draft for me. And I think that was another part of the reason why I felt like they struggled. Normally, they have one of the best drafts, and this year they had one of the best drafts. That's been the Cincinnati Bengals' MO. Since Marvin Lewis has come on board, they've drafted extremely well. You could say what you want about them taking high-risk players. Scared money don't make money in this league, okay? And yes, they do have some head cases on their team. Yes, they do have some guys that in some critical situations don't know how to keep their cool, as we saw in the Pittsburgh Steelers playoff game 2 years ago. That will cost them. But they also have a lot of talented guys on their football team, and this was a huge draft for them. And I think that's going to allow them to maybe cushion some of the blows. And the biggest question, the biggest storyline I have with this football team is, can they get it done offensively with all the weaponry that they have? That offensive line looking really suspect. And this is why you draft all those players like they've been doing over the last couple of years. This is why you draft Cedric Ogbuehi and you hope that he can step in and be a rock. This is why you draft Jake Fisher, hope that he can step in at the opposite tackle position and be a rock. You're struggling, and maybe he may be kicked inside the guard. I don't know. You sign Andre Smith back. I don't know what the intentions are there. Look, bottom line is the offensive line is a question mark. You lose Andre Whitworth. You lose Kevin Zeitler. You have some issues up front. Are those young guys ready to step in? And they struggled last year. These young guys struggled last season. Andy Dalton was under duress. Are they going to struggle again? I don't care how many weapons you have. I don't care if you've got A.J. Green out wide, and he dealt with some injuries last year, wasn't able to eclipse 1,000 yards for the first time in his career because he couldn't finish the season. They dealt with some things, but it doesn't matter who you have. I don't give a damn how fast John Ross is if Andy Dalton has zero time to get him the football. So we'll see what happens offensive line-wise. That's one of the biggest things I'm looking at is with all this offensive talent, is the offensive line going to be able to sustain itself well enough to allow the Bengals to maximize the amount of talent that they have on the offensive side of the football. Let's get to my prediction for them last season. Like I said, they were a huge disappointment. I had them going 11-5, making the playoffs, not winning the division. I think that I left that for the Steelers, but I had them going 4-2 in the division, and I thought they were going to be a playoff team. I thought they had reached the point where they were going to be a perennial playoff participant, or as I call it, a P3. And they're not a 3-peer as we saw last year. They simply dropped the football. They went 6-9-1. They struggled with injuries. They struggled to be consistent. They struggled up front, and it cost them last season. They were 3-3 in the division, and so they're looking for a bounce-back season. There were questions as to whether Marvin Lewis would be back. A lot of people thought that was it for him last year. He's got one more season. We'll see what happens. Their offseason acquisitions, linebacker Kevin Minter coming over from Arizona. They re-signed Wallace Gilberry. They also re-signed Dre Kirkpatrick and wide receiver Brandon LaFell. They have some key losses and some really big losses. Andrew Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler along the offensive line. That's going to hurt. Rex Burkhead at the running back position. The Patriots look like they're going to use the hell out of Rex Burkhead. And linebacker Ray Malaluga, not the biggest loss in the world, but he did provide you with depth and a guy that could stop the run on first and second down. So we go from all of those things to the Cincinnati Bengals and their schedule in 2017. Every team in this division, as I mentioned before, are going to be playing each other in week number 1. And so we talked about this first game of the season. I like the Bengals in week 1 at home versus Baltimore to take care of business, as you already know. Texans week 2 at home Thursday night football. For some reason, and I can't explain what it is, the Houston Texans are the Cincinnati Bengals kryptonite. Doesn't matter where the game is played. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback for the Texans. Could be TJ Yates, Tyler Jonathan Yates. It could be, I don't know, Case Keenum. It doesn't matter. They find a way to beat Cincinnati. It can be Monday night. It could be Thursday night. It could be a Saturday playoff game. They own Cincinnati, and because of that, I'm going with the Texans in that football game. Week 3, you're at Green Bay. You know damn well I don't like that spot for you there. And so because of that, that's going to be a loss. And we're going to go ahead and give the Packers that W and give the Bengals the L there. But then you come home, or actually you go on the road yet again after starting out the season with 2 home games. You then follow up with 2 roadies. But this time, you got a game at Cleveland that's winnable, and I expect you to take care of business there. Tell you what, though, it wouldn't shock me. You know what? No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. It wouldn't shock me. That Battle of Ohio, boy. When the Browns were okay, they would always seem to win one game versus Cincinnati, and it usually was at home. I really believe they can win that game, but they got to prove it to me. So I'll give Cincinnati the win there. Then you're home for Buffalo. I like you in that spot. I think that you're a better team than the Bills, and so you should be able to take care of business there. Then you're at Pittsburgh. I never like you in Pittsburgh, so you're going to take an L there. Indy at home, 1 o'clock. This is one of those games where I told you Indy is supposed to lose, but somehow they find a way to win. And I think this is one of those games where Indy's supposed to lose, but they find a way to win. And so you're going to take an L at the crib to the Indianapolis Colts. But then you get a gift. You get a bounce back week at Jacksonville, which is an opportunity for you to get back on track. And I think you're going to take full advantage of that opportunity and get the win there. No primetime game. Okay, one Thursday night game, week 2. Okay, as we go on to, and you have your bye week in week 6. So you go into the bye week at 3-2. You come out of the bye, and they give you a couple of toughies. At Pittsburgh and home for Indy. You could easily split those 2 games, but I see them both being L's. But then you get back on track against Jacksonville, and then you go to Tennessee. And I don't know. I think I'm drinking some of that Titans juice, man. I think the Titans get you here at home. I think Marcus Mariota and company and their ability to run the football might be a little bit too much for you to handle in that contest. Then you go, or excuse me, that's a loss. Then you go to Denver, and I don't like that spot at all for you. So we're going to double up on the loss. Double up on those L's. Take another one. Browns at the Crizzo. That's a W. So you're going to sweep the Browns like you should. Monday Night Football at the crib versus the Steelers. I got you winning that football game, as you already know. I already did the Steelers schedule, and I told you that they were going to split with the Cincinnati Bengals. Then you have the Chicago Bears. That's another winnable football game. So don't mind if I do hand you another dub. So you get the Dubski versus the Bears at the Crizzo. Then you go on the road to Minnesota. That is such a winnable game there. It really is. That is a winnable game, but I don't have you winning that game. So I'll give you an L there. That's a very winnable game for you late in the season on the road. Then you get Detroit at the crib. That's a game that I see you taking care of business in. And then you're at Baltimore. And I got you sweeping the Ravens. So let's go with another Dubski to wrap up this season for the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's see what the damage is once we're done here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 losses. So that means you're 9-7 are the Cincinnati Bengals. What did they do in the division? They went 1, 2, 1. So 2-1 at this point. 3-1, 4-1, 5-1. Shit, 5-1 in the division. So 9-7 overall. 5-1 in the division. And there are a couple of games up here. You could easily win the game against the Texans at the crib. I don't see you beating Green Bay at Green Bay. I don't see you beating Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh. You could easily beat the Colts at home. You could easily beat the Titans at Tennessee. I don't see you beating Denver at Denver, and I don't see you winning at Minnesota. But you could easily get to 10 wins here, 10 or 11, if you are able to turn some of these L's into dubs. You could easily lose some of the games I gave you. So 9-7 is right about where I think this Bengals team is going to end up. But 5-1 in the division, very, very impressive for the Cincinnati Bengals. See if we got anything on Twitter. And we don't. So we'll go straight to the comment section and see what you guys have to offer in terms of the Cincinnati Bengals. So, see where we'll start. We'll start here. Keeban says, how do you think Jeremy Maclin is going to do on the Ravens? We'll come back to that. Nev Bolick says, you're going to regret this prediction. We're going at least 4-2 in the division, not losing to the Vikings either. I don't know if he's talking about the Ravens or, yes, he's a Ravens fan. So we'll see. I don't mind. I won't regret it. I don't mind being wrong. I don't mind being wrong at all. As the Falcons fans from last year will attest to, I don't mind being wrong at all. I said they were going to be a 6-10 team. They ended up being 11-5, winning their division and going to the Super Bowl. So I don't mind being wrong at all. We're going to see. We will see. Hopefully your team backs up your thoughts on their season. See now. Ouija HTTR says, Red Rocket is going to get it done this year if, and he says big if, his weapons stay healthy. Joe Mixon should help. Yeah, he's looked good this preseason as well. Ouija HTTR also says, he says, I also can't wait to see Andrew Billings this year. And that's another guy you could probably add onto the list of key acquisitions or offseason acquisitions because this guy didn't play all last year. And so him coming back healthy, definitely going to help them in the middle of their defense, you would like to think. Cubone says, got a feeling the Bengals going to struggle this year. I don't think they're going to struggle. I think they're good enough to win 8 or 9 games, and I got them at 9-7. I think they're going to be somewhere in that 7 to 9 win range. So 7-9, 9-7. I think they're going to fall somewhere in there. Let's see what else we got. Ouija HTTR said, or we already read those. Keeban says, how is Mixon going to do this year? I like Joe Mixon. He's an uber talent. I talked about that in the draft wrap-up series and in the draft prospects one-on-one series with Joe Mixon, that this guy is ultra-talented. If not for the off-the-field transgressions, this guy would have been a first-round pick. He would have been one of the first running backs, if not the first running back off the board. We've seen him do some really good things in the preseason. I expect him to have a big year. Sort of like how we saw them use Giovanni Bernard in his first couple of seasons when Jay Gruden was the offensive coordinator. I expect them to use him similarly. I think he's going to touch it out of the backfield a little bit more than Bernard did, though. But I expect him to have equal as many catches out of the backfield because he's equally as dangerous out of the backfield as he is in the backfield. So I expect him to have a big impact on this Bengals offense. And I think they really hurt at the running back position last year. I thought that their running back position really didn't give them what they were expecting out of that position last year. And I think he's really going to help them bolster their running back position this season. Slip Ammo says, boy, he has not looked good at all, Lou. Even this preseason, he's been bad. Lots of quick passes to mask the stench of that line. I told you, that's the thing that worries me about this Cincinnati Bengals football team. And the tough defensive teams like Houston, I think they're going to give you fits. Teams that can get after the quarterback. That's why I don't like you against Denver. I don't like you against Houston. It's those types of teams that I really think are going to give you trouble in 2017 because they can get after your quarterback. Andy Dalton's not going to stand a chance against those teams that have elite pass rushers. I think those are the teams that are really going to hurt the Cincinnati Bengals team because that offensive line, not very good. Not very good at all. Q-Bone says he has the Bengals going 7-9 this season. And I think they're going to be somewhere in that 7-9, 9-7 range, somewhere in between there. So we're going to see as we go to this next. And make sure if you want your comment read to use the hashtag Louie Tee Live. We'll go to our final team in this division, the Cleveland Browns. And then we'll come clean up some of your comments from other teams in the division as we double back. But let's get to the Browns. And I think this is going to be a different season. Look, may not show up statistically in the wins and losses category, but I think Hugh Jackson still looking to find his quarterback. And I don't know if that guy's on the roster. You know, Deshaun Kaiser is going to get an opportunity to start in preseason game number 3. They are trying their hardest to get something out of Brock Osweiler. They traded for him, or the Texans said, look, we'll give you picks to get rid of him. Please just take him off our hands. And so they're looking to try to find a way to get something back in return. I don't think they ultimately want him on the roster. I think they would much rather just roll with one of the other quarterbacks that they have. And so heard he was on the trading block. We'll see what happens with that situation. But I don't know if the quarterback of the future is on that football team or not. Deshaun Kaiser may be it. He may not be it. Bottom line is, until they get that situation rectified, they're going to struggle as a collective group. But they're building something on the defensive side of the football. I'm telling you that right now. If it can all come together, and one of their biggest bugaboos and pet peeves has been the fact that they just can't stay healthy. You know, they've dealt with injuries, seems like every single year, but they're building some stuff. I love Christian Kirksey at linebacker. I love Jamie Collins at linebacker. Even though he freelances and it isn't where he's supposed to be all the time, he's uber athletic, and being next to Christian Kirksey, I think they're going to make a hell of a tandem at the linebacker position. I love Myles Garrett. I love that selection. Like I said before, they're building some stuff. I love the draft that they turned in this year. I love the draft that they turned in last year with Carl Nassib and guys like that. They're building some things. Jabril Peppers. They got stuff. And if they can figure out how to utilize all of that stuff on the defensive side of the football, look out for the Cleveland Browns on the defensive side of the football. They're not going to win many games offensively. The games that they do win this year, it's going to be because they turn teams over and they're able to generate points via their ability to get stops defensively, shorten the field because of great field position, forcing 3-and-outs, and getting the football back to the offense in great field position, or generating turnovers. I think this defense has a chance to keep them in ball games and give them a shot in 2017. That being said, I thought they were going to be 3-13 last year. I knew they were going to be a bad football team. I knew Hugh Jackson didn't have a lot to work with. 2-4 in the division. It didn't work out that way. They went 1-15. They went 0-6 in the division. They were one of the laughing stocks of the league, along with the Jets, who was also a train wreck, and the Bears and the 49ers. And so I don't know if this season is going to be that much better from a wins and losses standpoint. They're not going to be 1-15, I can assure you of that. That defense is much improved, and I think that defense alone is going to get them. Remember, they were in ball games. They had opportunities to beat a lot of teams last year. They should have won games at Washington, at Miami. They should have won those games last year. They had opportunities to win games that they just simply could not find a way to win because they're not a good football team. But they had opportunities last year to win some ball games, and so I think with their defensive improvements, I think they're going to be able to find a way to win some of those games that they weren't able to hold on to a season ago. Off-season acquisitions. Wide receiver Kenny Britt. That's a big get for them. I don't know if Kenny Britt's a true number one in this league. I still don't think he is. But they've got guys that they like. The kid they took out of Baylor last year, Corey Coleman, they're looking for him to step up and have a huge leap in year 2. They got some stuff. Add Kenny Britt to that, and they've got a formidable group of skill guys. Njoku at the tight end position. They're building some things out there in Cleveland. Who's going to get him the football? That's a big question. Speaking of which, quarterback Brock Osweiler, who they acquired via trade with the Texans, is he a key acquisition? He may be gone before the season even gets started. We'll see. Offensive lineman Kevin Zeitler and J.C. Treader were added in the offseason. Those are big moves to try to fortify an offensive line that they've spent picks and resources on over the last few years, but really hasn't netted them a lot. They've had some guys, Joe Thomas, still one of the best in the business. I like Joe Bitonio, but after that, I'm not sold on the Florida State kid that they took a couple of years ago, Cameron Irving. I think they took another Florida State offensive lineman this year that I'm not in love with. So, but he's got a lot of upside, but he's a big, tall, skinny guy. I think they took him. I could be wrong, but in any event, offensive line is still an issue, and I think those guys are going to help come in and give them some depth, and in the case of Zeitler, really help them in the run game. Defensive back Calvin Pryor was traded for with the Jets. So that gives you another physical presence at the safety position. Like I told you, they're building some things on defense. If nothing else, they're going to be a physically imposing team defensively, and Pryor is a guy that is a hammer in that secondary. They re-signed linebackers Jamie Collins and Christian Kirksey. I already talked about those two guys and how I absolutely love Christian Kirksey's game. Running back Isaiah Crowell was tendered at a second-round pick level, and so he's back in the fold, along with Britton Colquitt. Look, when you punt as much as the Cleveland Browns did a season ago, you better re-sign your goddamn punter if you like him, and they did, so they re-signed Britton Colquitt. And finally, Joe Bitonio was re-signed to a long-term deal, and I like Joe Bitonio a lot. Liked him coming into the draft a few years ago. Thought he was one of the better linemen in that draft, and I think he's done a really good job of converting over from tackle to guard at the NFL level. So a lot of offseason acquisitions for this Browns football team. You go to their key losses, Josh McCown and Robert Griffin III at the quarterback position. You could probably bat your eyes at that and say, key losses, how so? Well, those guys started a bulk of the games, and granted, you won one game last season, but those were the guys that started for you last year. And I actually like Josh McCown as a backup quarterback in this league. So those are losses there. Tramon Williams never lived up to the contract that he got coming over from Green Bay. Tight end Gary Barnidge. Damn, what happened to him? Just 2 years ago, this guy was a Pro Bowler. And last year, he was just ravaged by injuries and really wasn't consistent at all. Linebacker Demario Davis was traded back to the Jets. It's crazy. He came over in free agency last year and went right back to the team that drafted him in New York. One of those situations where the grass just simply isn't greener on the other side. So you don't need Davis anymore anyway after getting Jamie Collins and having Christian Kirksey come back into the mix. Demario Davis became expendable anyhow. So with that being said, let's jump into the Browns and their schedule for 2017. So as we know, they're in a tough division. I expect them to struggle in the division, but there's some winnable games on this schedule, man. And because of that, let's see what the Cleveland Browns are going to do. Because I think they're going to surprise a couple of teams, win some games that maybe they probably shouldn't. But I think because of the defensive talent that they have, they may be able to eke out a game or two. And so let's get into the schedule. Week 1, home for the Steelers, absolutely not. I think it's going to be a much more competitive game than some may think, but I don't think they're going to win that game in Week 1. Week 2, you're at Baltimore. I don't like you in that spot either. And so you take another L to start the season. Then you're at Indy. This is a winnable game. However, no, you're not going to beat the Indianapolis Colts at Indy. And I don't know what their schedule looks like, but they may be in desperate need of a victory by the time they get to Week 3. And I just don't see you getting that. You're home for Cincinnati. I think you can win this game. I gave you an L already here. But I'm going to tell you what. When your team is formidable, and you weren't last year, but when your team is formidable, you guys have done a really good job of winning a game versus Cincinnati. And usually that game comes at home in the Battle of Ohio. I could easily see you winning that game. I don't trust you right now, and I don't trust your quarterback situation. And so because of that, you're going to take an L. But that's one of those games, flip a coin for me. I think you got a legitimate shot at winning that game. Home for the Jets. Everybody beats the Jets. And so you get a W here against the New York Jets. At Houston, I really think if that game was at home, I think you have a really good shot at winning that game just because their quarterback situation isn't ideal. And I think you could turn over whoever is at quarterback and maybe score enough to win. But on the road, I think it's going to be a lot tougher for your young quarterback, whomever it is, or your quarterback in general, whomever that guy is, to win that football game. Maybe it's Brock Osweiler, and maybe you guys want to go out and get a game ball for Brock against his former team. That would be nice. Don't see it happening, though. Tennessee at the crib, week number 7. I like the Titans this year, but I'm going to tell you what, man. This is the type of team, athletically gifted, can move side to side, that can keep Marcus Mariota in the pocket. I think this Browns team will be able to stop the run this year. If they're able to do that, and Marcus Mariota isn't able to be mobile and has to try to beat them primarily from the pocket alone, without the assistance of the run game, this is an upset for me. But I'm gonna take the Browns here at home against Tennessee Titans. I like that one. I like that matchup. I like that spot at home. If that was on the road, I wouldn't give it to you. But that's at home. I think you can take them. Sunday, you're in London, week number 8 versus the Minnesota Vikings. I don't like that matchup for you at all. And so you'll go into your bye week with an L there. And so you're 2-6 heading into the bye, which is a vast improvement from last year through 8 weeks of football. As you come off your bye, you're at Detroit. I don't like that game for you on the road. Again, had that been a home game, I may have sat and thought about it very hard. Jacksonville at the crib. Look, man, go get you one, man. Everybody's beating the Jags these days. You got them at the crib. If that was in Jacksonville, I might have actually given it to the Jags. But you at the crib, man. Get those boys. Sick them. At Cincinnati. Nah. If you're going to beat Cincinnati, it's going to be at the crib. So, got to take the L there. At San Diego. If that was at home, that'd be another winnable football game. And by then, by the time you get to them, they're going to be so damaged by injuries that you might legitimately have a shot. But I can't roll with it. Green Bay at your crib. Nah. Not feeling that one. Baltimore at the Crizzo. Who did I give? I think I gave y'all a look. Did I give y'all a look? I think I might have gave Baltimore the sweep. I only got Baltimore losing once in the division, so I don't even need to go back. I got you losing that game too. At Chicago, man, if you were at home, I'd give you the look there, but you're not at home. And so I'm going to give the Bears the look at the crib, and then you finish up at Pittsburgh. I don't like that matchup. And so, hey, man. 3-13. That's what I predicted you last year. You only got one. I'm gonna double down on 3-13 again. You were 0-6 in the division last year, and by the looks of it, you're 0-6 in the division again this year. But I'm telling you, you could easily win a game or two that I didn't give you in this sequence. You could easily lose a game that I get. I think you're gonna beat Jacksonville. I think you're gonna beat. I don't know. I think you're going to beat Jacksonville and the Jets. You could easily beat Tennessee. I think you can beat them. They could easily beat you as well. There's some other games in here that I think you got a shot. Chicago, winnable football game. I think that Texans game is winnable because their quarterback position isn't that great, but their defense is so good that they may stifle you as well. That's going to be an interesting game to look at. And you may jump up and bite somebody in the division. And if you do, I think it's going to be Cincinnati. But we'll see. You may even get Baltimore. Look, I'm going to tell you what. Baltimore is another team. Remember 2 years ago with Josh McCown, you went into Baltimore and stunned those boys in overtime? Josh McCown threw for over 400 yards on those boys. You can get Baltimore, man. I'm just not signing up for it. So, in any event, that's what I got for the Cleveland Browns. All right. Let's take to Twitter, see if there's any comments there. If there aren't any comments, we'll go to the live feed and see what you guys have to say about the Cleveland Browns this year. And I'm pretty sure everybody's going to dump on them and talk about how bad they're going to be and yada, yada, yada. But we'll see. Let's get to some of your comments. Cubone says, that players list is huge. God damn, I told you that their acquisition list was going to be massive, much like the Ravens losses list was. Vincent Phillips says, Browns aren't even the second worst team in the league. That's his prediction. You might be right about that. I think the Jags got a legitimate shot along with the Jets of being the two worst teams in the league this year. Kevin says, that Cleveland O-line is amazing. We'll see. If that O-line can be as good as it seems like it could be on paper, they could have a shot to not only run the football, but give whoever is at quarterback time to throw it, which will give them a shot to win the more than the 3 games that I gave them this season. We'll see. Jarrett011 Green says, I think Kaiser will play decent for the Browns this year. If he starts, we'll see. I think, with the Browns, with teams like that where there's a lot of uncertainty at quarterback, normally everybody gets a turn at some point. Kevin Hogan may see the field. Deshaun Kaiser may see the field. Everybody might get a shot for them at some point. So we'll see. M. Hughes 4444 says, Cleveland lines on both sides will be fantastic. It's the supporting cast they don't quite have yet. Look for them to come on later in the season, but still only net 5 wins. So he's got them getting to 5 wins. He also said the Browns picked up Brandon Thompson from the Bengals today. So that's going to give them some more depth on the defensive line. Let's see. Kevin says, is Caleb Brantley starting? I don't know. I do not know what his status is with that football team, but that was a steal for them. If his legal situation pans out and he's able to play and isn't suspended by the league, that could be a big time get for them. Getting a player of his caliber in the 5th or 6th round, first round talent, 5th or 6th round. Jared Green says losing to the Colts is cold, Louie. LOL. Yeah, man. They're at Indy. If that game was at home, they probably could try to steal that one. I can't see it happening. Cubone says, feeling the Browns go 6-10. Oh, okay. Feeling a little love there for the Cleveland Browns. We'll see. He says Browns are going to be, and Ouija HTTR says Browns are going to be drafting their quarterback early. Jeffrey H says, giving both the Browns and Ravens the loss, expecting a tie. I gave them both a loss for what game? Let's go back. I don't want to shortchange anybody a potential W. So the Ravens play week 2 and week 15. So let's go back to the Ravens schedule and see what I did in weeks 2 and 15. Oh, here we go. Let's see, week 2, I gave them a win. Oh, I gave them a loss. Okay, so, hey, what do you know? Browns get it. I told you, I thought they could beat Baltimore. And so they don't go 0-6 in the division, but rather 1-5 in the division. So we found them another W, man. Appreciate that. And so now they're 4-12. Not 3-13. So 4-12, 1-5 in the division. And let me thank Jeffrey for that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Got you. M. Hughes says, you're seriously overrating Baltimore, my friend. They simply aren't that good. No weapons on offense and a young defense. Similar situation for the Browns. but they have a quarterback, and that's why they're going to find a way to win some games that the Browns simply will not. The Nintendo guy says, do you think the 49ers are better than the Browns? I actually do not think the 49ers will be better than the Browns this year. I'm going to tell you this, though. I like what the 49ers are doing. I love John Lynch and what he's come in and done. I love Kyle Shanahan as an offensive mind in this league. I love Joe Williams, a guy that I think is going to fit perfect in that zone run blocking scheme. They got a lot of talent. They still don't have a quarterback. That's going to really hamper them this year. Billy Holt, when he's on, can play well enough for them to win some games, but I just think they're still lacking in San Francisco at the skill positions. They got Pierre Garçon. That's going to help, but I think they still got a ways to go offensively. We'll see what happens, though. The Niners are a whole different team, and we'll talk more about the Niners, obviously, when we get to the NFC West. But there were some questions earlier. Let's see if I can go back and talk about some of the questions that were asked earlier, and then we'll get out of here. I think there were a couple of questions. Smoke says the Browns will improve that defense, and Njoku was going to be a stud. Who's getting him the football? Hard to, and you know what? Good skill position guys generally still get it done. I mean, look at Terrell Pryor last year going over 1,000 yards. He had about 3 or 4 different guys throwing him the football last season. So normally those kinds of weapons still shine anyway. There was something else that I wanted to come back around to. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it. But in any event, we are going to conclude this. I have nothing else on Twitter. I don't think I have any more comments. And so with that being said, we're going to end this stream. So let me recap. Let me get my device in front of me and go ahead and quickly recap what we've done here, because I need to keep this as a reference as to what these teams are going to do this season. So we got the Steelers at, let's go break through it again so I can have my eyes on it. Steelers at 11-5. And they go 4-2 in the division, if I'm not mistaken. Win against the Browns, win against the Ravens, win against the Bengals. Loss, win. So 4-2 in the division. So 11-5 for the Steelers. And 11-5 and 4-2 in the division. All right. With the next team up, Baltimore Ravens, I believe I had them going 8-8 if I'm not mistaken. And I think I got them going 5-1 in the division. Let's see. No, they can't be 5-1. They got to be 4-2. And that's the mistake I made, because I remember I said they were 5-1 and I was surprised because they were 8-8 and I was like 5-1. Wow. They actually lost 3 games in the division, I think. So let me go through this again. 3-3. I think they're 3-3 because they lose to Cincinnati week 1. They lose to Pittsburgh at least once. And they lose to the Browns. So they split. And then I got them getting swept by Cincinnati. So no, they weren't the team that I said they were 5-1. They're actually 2-4 in the division. Are the Baltimore Ravens. Cincinnati might be the team that was 5-1 in the division at 9-7. That's who it may be. I know Cincinnati is 9-7. And I have them going 5-1 in the division, I believe. They sweep Baltimore, they sweep Cleveland, and they lose once to the Steelers. So 5-1 in the division for the Bengals. And then the Browns, 4-12. And I think they're 1-5 in the division. Thanks to my man Jeffrey. I was able to make that correction. 4-12. So they're 3 games better than they were a season ago. And 1-5 in the division. So that's going to do it for me on this particular breakdown of the AFC North. We got one more North to knock down tonight, the NFC North. I'll return with that one in about 15 to 30 minutes, somewhere in that general time frame. Be on the lookout for that. I'll see you a little bit later on. Remember, if it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here on the Louie Tee Network. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. And also, make sure you join me for the NFC North divisional breakdown a little bit later on tonight. I'm your man, Louie Tee, signing off. Until next time, have a good one. See you later.